Picture this, casual British evening and I pull up at home. I go inside, pour myself some popcorn and I sit down in the living room. I start browsing Netflix and I find Scarface 1983 and spend the next 3 hours watching supposed cinema. And as I stare at the end credits, I look and I think to myself,
what the hell did I just watch? Scarface is one of the most highly rated crime films of the 80s. It's so good that my dad even convinced me to watch it. Yet after sitting through this entire thing, I can safely say I have no idea why the hell everyone loves this movie. Actually, I do. But let me explain. See, one of the main reasons people love this movie so much is our main protagonist, Tony Montana, played by Al Pacino. A lot of people claim it as Pacino's best performance. I mean, like, the acting doesn't feel as extraordinary as people are making it out to be. I mean, of course, there are memorable quotes in the movie that everyone remembers. The amount of times I've used that line with women. I feel like just the memorable quotes alone don't hold his performance together. And personally, I think that the accent that he puts on is something that kind of hinders emotional moments in the film and just makes the performances seem a bit, well, eerily similar to The Room.
Oh, hi, Mark.
To some people, this was the golden era of filmmaking, but just to me, it's just kind of laughable. Man, I'm definitely going to get slaughtered for these takes. Whew. Now, despite me going after Tony Montana, I can definitely say he is by far the most well-developed character in the film. He has a backstory. We know why he wants to rise to the top. We know that he's loyal for whoever he works for and for his family. We know he has an ego that he loses control of as he reaches the top. And we know that he has paranoia that growingly gets worse as he rises through the ranks. And we know that once he reaches the top, all he's focused on is how he can keep rising up. As Elvira states,
"Can't you stop talking about money? It's boring, Tony."
But that's it, man. Like, Tony Montana is literally the only character that is so well developed in this film. Everyone else is so one-dimensional and you just don't know anything about them. Elvira is an intriguing character because we just see her as cold all the time. And she's constantly taking substances and smoking. Like, what's the story there? She also marries Tony, yet they barely make contact with each other half the time. And when they do, it's just arguing and swearing at each other. So why marry him? I mean, like, what happened to Tony's mother? She tried to stop Gina from going to him and then she ended up going to him anyway. Why did she let that happen? So many characters, so much potential to connect these characters to the downfall of Tony, yet I don't care about any of them. None of them left an impact on me. I mean, like, Manny, Tony's best friend that's been with him all the way, gets killed by Tony himself after he finds out he's sleeping with his sister. This is supposed to be an emotional death in the movie, yet it didn't leave an impact on me because I just didn't know bro at all. Like, there was no story with him half the time. I mean, like, Gina, which is Tony's sister, gets shot during the ambush, yet, like, I didn't care at all. I mean, to be honest, the music was the only thing that made me feel any emotional impact during this entire disturbing scene. I mean, have you heard the lines in this scene?
Oh, come on, Tony. Fuck me. Fuck me.
What the hell?
Regardless of what I have to say about the characters, I feel like a lot of the blame is on the structure of the story. The story itself had so much potential, but just the way it was structured was so irritating, man. I mean, before I get into the structure of the story, I feel like I should explain for you guys the basic story of Scarface. Tony Montana is a Cuban refugee who flees the country during the Exodus in 1980. I have no idea what that is. And he ends up in a refugee camp in Florida. His friend Manny then gives him an opportunity for them to get green cards and become American citizens. This is by far the worst decision Tony makes. Out of everywhere, man. Why Florida? When both Manny and Tony finally make it to Miami, they're then able to work for the drug lord Frank Lopez. Tony shows his potential to Frank when he has to deal with his Colombian drug ambush, and as Tony continues working for Frank, he begins to rise up, and eventually he kills Frank and takes over his business. And as Tony continues rising to the top, his ego, paranoia, and morality are kind of the key components that lead to his downfall. You know, for a movie that's nearly the same length as Avengers Endgame, they do a shit job at explaining stuff. Like, for starters, how many time jumps do you need? Bro, I swear to you, I would enjoy this movie if they actually took the time to explain stuff. Like, after Frank Lopez is killed, Tony comes and picks up Elvira, and then when he's walking out, he sees a blimp that says, "The world is yours." Hardest quote of all time, by the way. You know, but then we get a montage of Tony rising to the top. He's being friendly with Sosa, who's this Bolivian drug lord that he made a deal with, and he's taking bags, and I mean not one, bags of money into a bank. Bro, when did you do all this? Frank Lopez is a big Miami drug lord. I just find it weird that no one's after you. None of the people that work for him say anything. Gina's in this montage. This is the same woman whose mother was practically pushing her away from him, and now she's just here. Her mother, I guess. No one else told Scarface was about this like Cuban immigrant rising from the bottom all the way to the top. I was expecting to see so much action, crime, blood, violence, drugs, yet it feels like it's only showing a bit of that. Instead, it's rushing over those aspects of the story and giving us a lot of unnecessary dialogue. I mean, seriously, have you heard some of the lines in this film?
You like kids? Because I like kids. I like boys, girls, no matter me.
Bro, I just remember being sat down confused at the fact that I've seen more in-depth storytelling on a TikTok than I have on this film. Like, even if the structure of the story was corrected, I still feel like there were so many logical aspects in this film that I just couldn't help but laugh at. So this film really just threw logic out the window when it made it, you know that? I think the scriptwriters might have been inhaling from that Mount Everest of cocaine on Tony's desk. So I mentioned that in the beginning of the movie, around about the beginning, Tony was sent into a Colombian drug deal which turned out to be a setup, and then Tony and his friend Angel were roped up and threatened with a chainsaw. First off, this is just a peculiar place to have a drug deal. It's surrounded by people, it's open to everyone, and well, that's just it. What a better place to have a major drug deal than this tiny ass hotel room. It just looks like an average flat you'd find in like Hackney or Croydon.
Antonio! Mira! Watch what happened to your friend.
Bro, how the hell does no one hear this loud ass chainsaw, man? Like, bro, you can turn up the TV volume, that's not making it any quieter, it's a chainsaw. How the hell does nobody recognize bro over here? Or even the license plate on the car? Look, I understand these geezers not seen anything, but you're really telling me that Stranger Things over here wouldn't have seen anything? You were staring right at it. You are shooting a man in broad daylight in a highly populated area. Even if Hall & Oates didn't snitch on you, someone else would have. And like, police would just be investigating it. Which brings me perfectly to my next point. A little while down the film, Tony's arrested for money laundering, but his lawyer, which has to be Saul Goodman or something, manages to evade all of those charges, yet he tells Tony that he can probably still get in on tax evasion. What I don't get about that is, surely if you're charged with tax evasion, you shouldn't be able to travel freely and have all your assets still with you. I'm not Harvey Specter, I don't know how the law system works in the US, but surely you can't just go from Miami to New York when you're being charged with tax evasion to execute a hit. Another moment that confuses the hell out of me, and I feel if I got some explanation I'd understand. Frank Lopez is this big Miami drug lord, yet constantly he has no security around him, and then even when Tony comes in threatening his life, Frank begins begging for his life at his knees. Just doesn't fit the character to me. Although I have stated in my title that Scarface is a bad movie, I admire how well Tony Montana was portrayed. There is no antagonist in this film, rather Tony himself is his own antagonist. His pride, his ego, his morality, his paranoia, all key components in his conflict with himself. In so many scenes of this movie, Tony is always an aggressor, and he's consistently confident in situations even when he's caught red-handed. And look, Pacino delivers a fantastic performance. Ideally, to me, that's not his best performance. I'd rather give that to Jack and Jill.
What's my name?
Dunkachino.
It's a whole new game.
Dunkachino.
You want creamy goodness? I'm your friend.
Despite my problems with the movie, I really love the set design. I think the choice of setting it in Miami was perfect. The amazing retro futuristic setting of Miami, I really love it. The clothing that the characters wear is just fantastic. All of it makes for a good movie, and I prefer it over the bland grey and black cityscape. And although I feel it has a lack of it, the action in this film still delivers. It's fantastic. It's definitely better than the dialogue moments.
You like kids?
Overall, Scarface isn't the worst movie of all time, but I feel like people that are claiming it's one of the best movies of all time, I just don't agree with it. I'm not ready for these comments, man.
You like kids?